Hello, everybody. Yeah, it's Daisy. I am really excited to finally get to present basically an overview of what is now officially my thesis project. For the people who might not know me as well, or the first time you're coming by, which, hi, welcome. I am currently attending college for a degree in animation and game art with a specialization in visual development. What you're seeing on the background is actually one of my pieces from an environment and prop class. My thesis project will be basically a game trailer. It is titled GODSLAYER. It'll be 3D models with a lot of 2D assets in order to basically be efficient, just like I was actually making a game. I suppose let's jump right in and I will show you my animatic first, and then I'll give you an overview of the visual development that's gone into it so far.
I will bring it back, my beloved. Give her back. Come and get her. So, you think you can slay a god?
Alrighty then, welcome back. How was that? Did you enjoy it? Are you excited to play it? Hell yeah. Quick run of credits for it. The voices are all done by my friend Encrypted, who is friggin' awesome. Also an artist. I will link to his social media down in the description. And all of the music, and this is a temp track from Castlevania Season 1, since that was kind of a heavy inspiration for it. I figured I'd use that as my temp track because it does the job. The finished animatic, or the finished film, will actually have its own score. And those of you who know me quite well, you probably already know who's doing it. But I'm really excited because I'll be actually working with my partner, and I'll talk more about that when we go into the visual development and I talk about GODSLAYER as a whole. So, without further ado, let's hop in. I'm probably going to censor out my actual last name. Our first page is all inspiration reference, so these are a bunch of things that were just inspiring me. Reference-wise, Castlevania is a huge inspiration of mine. Mostly the show. I do like the aesthetics of the games, but I dislike Konami a little bit more. And then as far as like gameplay goes for this, you probably saw it in the trailer, but Dead Cells is a huge inspiration for it. It's probably the closest approximation to how this would play, because I'd want it to have like cool Metroidvania elements without necessarily being a fully fledged Metroidvania. But also Dead Cells is the only thing where it feels like you hit really hard and it just feels good. And that's super fitting for Ace, because he is a heavy. He's not a dexterous boy. He's actually a gunsmith outside of the Animatic. There's a whole buttload of lore I can get into with him, and perhaps that's a video for later on down the line. But yeah, Ace is also a bit of a cowboy, so that's why you've got some, like, space cowboy stuff. I tend to do a lot of genre blending with my works. This is, like, dark fantasy, but also has some steampunk elements. So yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of gosh danged art. Bloodborne is a really good benchmark for the tone of this. And you can see these references were actually primary inspirations for the death character, which I'll get into later. And specifically, I'd like to note the floaty hands from Melania in Breath of the Wild. I just think the idea of floaty hands on a god are really cool. Nobody needs limbs. So, yeah, these are just some references for the style and final look. While I don't play Guilty Gear or Persona, I really love their, like, 3D styles. Because you can see here, even though it's not in motion, Guilty Gear's style is like 3D, but it's so good at looking 2D. So, yeah. I just really love the way Guilty Gear's newest games look, and I want to pay some love to that and try to do it myself. And then just Castlevania backgrounds are gorgeous. And I want to do that stereotypical anime thing where you've got, like, toon characters and just gorgeous painted backgrounds. And also this semester I've kind of learned that I actually like painting backgrounds, so that's convenient. Next up, we have a really quick asset list. This is mostly for technical reasons why it's useful. You really only need one of these if you're doing a huge project. But it's just kind of an overview of everything that I will need to be making. So, oh boy. And yeah, I've also done a very silly drawing of Ace with a cup of coffee in this, because I didn't get to acknowledge his love of coffee in the Animatic yet. Yeah. Next up, we have our character renders. So, it's none other than our lovely boy, Ace Beaumont, and the God of Death, Malik Hamavet, but you can also just call him the God of Death. He's pretty chill. Now, I guess some insights about their character designs, which I can get into more, but Ace was originally an NPC for a Dungeons & Dragons campaign that I ran called the Jade Omen, and it takes place in my overarching world called the Folly of Helios. Oh boy, I could ramble about that a whole bunch, because I know all the information, I just don't have all of it written down in a cohesive manner. But yeah, he is originally an elf, though that got scrapped for the purposes of not confusing viewers about his mortality. Personally, I don't find it confusing, but that's because I'm an avid fantasy person. I grew up watching Lord of the Rings, so I don't question it when I see an elf. I'm like, yeah, they just live for a long time, and they're really pretty. So, canonically pretend he's an elf, but for the sake of the project, I've made him a human. He has his signature shotgun, because Ace, he shoots first and asks questions later. It's not the best thing for him. So I've actually added a small crest to his shawl. I never actually quite decided what that was. It was just out of a need to make the design a little bit more specific to him. I was thinking that maybe it was a pin or something given to him by his wife Sinmani, but it's not particularly important how he got it. It's just a nice little thing. And regarding death, it was super important to me that he's not aggressive, if that makes sense. His job is to oversee the order of life and death and the natural cycles of the universe. It's not his job to come and, like, cleave down people and take their souls. He just sees to it that things go as they're supposed to. Everything tends towards entropy, that sort of thing. Which is actually part of why I've going for an hourglass with him, because it both measures time, but when you flip it over, it just keeps going. So yeah, this was me making an effort to make a version of Death that is comprehensible to most people, but still has my own aesthetics and opinions, like, built into his design. He's a chill guy, I swear. It's just that, you know, Ace decided to yell at him first, and then after he was supposed to have learned his lesson, the first thing he did was shoot him with a shotgun, so... How nice can you be to a guy when he just doesn't listen to you? Some of Ace's original design, if you will, still technically canon. But most of it's my own work. There's one piece that I commissioned from Danny VHS. I will make sure to also link to his social medias as well in the description, because he's an awesome artist and also working on his thesis project with another one of my friends. I won't dig too much into all of this artwork because there is some sensitive materials regarding some of these things, because Ace has had a rough time in his life. But maybe if I do an overview of Ace, I can touch on those and put a proper, like, trigger warning in. If you're really keen, you've probably already spotted it. Yeah. I guess something I'll bring to note is the original GODSLAYER concept design. I just went full Sephiroth. Something else neat you can see is that Ace actually has his wife's necklace in the original GODSLAYER concept, which I thought was cool, but it also would have been a nightmare to animate. Plus, there's also... I didn't really have a chance to establish clear symbols with her, so I figured I wouldn't make her as much of a character in this trailer. But, fun fact, canonically she's a dragon in human form. Again, not super important to this animatic, but very fun to know. I keep calling it an animatic, but it's going to be a short film. Or a short trailer. I don't know what to call this thing. It's weird. And next we have some of the style reference, which is a lot of what we saw on, like, the inspiration page. Lots of character exploration. I played with different shapes. I was like long leggies. There was one where I made it short. His original hairstyle was a lot more anime, and I'll be honest, I liked it a whole bunch. But it just... I ended up simplifying it down so it wasn't hard to animate. And it was just too much hair in his face, apparently. I'll be honest, I still love it. But I didn't have the final say. It also still had more armor on his trench coat. God, well, duster. I just really like trench coats and dusters. I will blame my exposure to Hellsing and Trigun as a child. Then this is me moving on to revising his outfit. As you can see, there's a lot of anatomy issues here, but it still gets the point across about the outfit. I saw that man's hairstyle on the internet, and I was just like, I need to put this hair on my boy right now. And then I just didn't know what to do with the pants, so I put chaps on him. Which is really funny because the original concept sketches of Ace, when I was designing him for the D&D campaign like 2 years ago, he had chaps, and then I cut them out because I just kept forgetting to draw them. And now they've come back. Then have some call-out sheets so you can just see what things are designed from. Of course, whenever I do a shotgun bandolier, I can't help but think of Revolver Ocelot, because I am a big Metal Gear fan. Next up is we have some of that iterating on his outfit, because originally on his left, he just had that neat little like vest and whatnot, and then it was like, make it more unique. So I did. There was one thing where I tried out giving him spurs. I don't know why. I was just like, fine, you know what, spurs. Also tried giving him a scarf, because man, as soon as I drew that shawl, I really wanted to give him a scarf, but it's just... cut it out so it's not hard to animate. Wow, I put pockets on these, like, oh, what if utility chaps, and then I forgot to put the pockets on the finished version. That's probably fine, I don't like the pockets that much anyway. This is also probably the only complete and detailed drawing of the pin you'll find, because I went in and did a very quick, like, draw it flat and then perspective warp and then draw the back of it as well. You'd be surprised drawing the back of pins, surprisingly simple. Just need good reference. Iterating on Ace's outfit was really interesting because I had a lot of people suggesting that I give him battle damage, and I was just thinking about it and I'm like, no, he has the money to take care of his clothing, and also he's the one choosing to challenge death. He would make sure he's in good condition before he goes and, you know, tries to kill a god. So it just didn't make sense to me to give him, like, patches on his clothes and rough things up. But that's probably just because I know him too well. I could tell you this man's whole life story. But I did try it out. It was just wrong in my soul. Yeah, oh boy. Here is our sketches for Death's original design. So, in concept, in actual, like, canon of the D&D setting that this god of death is in, he has a terrifying appearance to most because most people are scared of death, even though he is a very chill guy. That's why we have horrible Bloodborne monster for his original design. The thumbnails down below were actually like original posters that I was thinking about designing for GODSLAYER, but then it just didn't happen over the summer because that was 2020. Of course it didn't happen. The top right is a storytelling image, which I had done at the beginning of the semester to try to pitch it. So you can see it's basically the entire conflict summarized, but in an environment that doesn't necessarily make sense. You can also see one of my friend's concept sketches for the storytelling image, because I had originally pitched this as a group project. When it came time to prepare our second pitches, I wasn't into any of the ones that they wanted to do. And nobody was super, like, into doing GODSLAYER, even though they were like, well, I could do it. So I just kind of went full Madman Hodorowski and set off on my own to make GODSLAYER because I wanted to see it happen. There's some concept sketches for the storytelling images. As you can see, there was some stuff where we played with Death having a closer resemblance to Melania. I also played with him being more serpent-like. Next up here is basically some of my reference for Death's designs. Yes, we get to get into him now. Really liked a lot of the shapes, and I wanted to give the Bloodborne vibes. Again, these are a lot of references that were already seen. Also, I just love that painting by Jean-Baptiste. I don't know any of his other work, I just really like it. His cool character design, the horns are amazing, the skull is amazing. Here were some of the concept sketches. You can see I had a little bit of fun with these. I played with the robe being a little bit more like tangible and material. That makes sense. I also said, but what if feathers? Actually, I quite like the design where he's got like brambles as a sort of collar. I know there's a different word for it, but like brambles as a collar and then like a feather sort of lower collar that drapes over the shoulders. I thought that was cool, but I didn't know what to do with it to render it in my style without going ham on the details. There's also a very tiny round one that also had like shoulder antlers, because I didn't want to get yelled at for not trying anything round. So I did some silly stuff in visual development as well. I will say I'm a little sad I couldn't get anything with antlers to work terribly well, because I love the idea of putting antlers on designs where they're not supposed to be. Then we have, this was the original design for Death that I had come up with. It's a lot more like normal and easy to understand with a more realistic skull. I also did like silly like guess I'll die meme. Also a very silly doodle that also explains the plot of GODSLAYER in a very dumb manner. Here was my iterating on sketches. Fun fact, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here so that you can see it with better quality. This little painting down here was actually the like first sketch that I did of it, because sometimes I just find it's easier and faster to block things out in painting form. And then I just simplified it and translated it down to these lines. I guess from a technical standpoint, it'll be cool to talk about. So Death is going to have his skull and hands be 3D, and animated. That way I don't need a whole entire rig. I also specifically designed him without a mouth, so I only need to lip sync Ace for one line, because his first line is internal, which actually I completely forgot to put like an echo on that to make it clear that it's internal. Oops. The body I'm going to 2D animate because I just really love doing 2D effects animation. Also, I do like 2D animation quite a bit better, and this is just one of the few ways I can kind of sneak it into my project. I got asked to make Death's hands more unique, so I sat down and I iterated a whole bunch. Ignore that cat paw. Again, I didn't want to get yelled at for not trying a round design. Actually, some cool stuff that I will point out with this hand design, because it has a surprising amount of thought put into it. I started off with this sketch, which is actually mostly based off of the anatomy. You'll actually see the similar line with the bones. And I just realized that corner is getting cut off. That's okay, it still shows. And then the solid part over here with the palm. Also, the Unmother's hand has this sweet cracking on it that I wanted to bring in. And then the Apathy Grim from Ruby just has cool hand anatomy. So there it is. And then I was like, well, it's shattering, so I guess some of those parts would be floating. There's the hand design for this. And here's the call out sheet for Death. So yeah, and that about ends the character section of things. This is some start on the environment work. At time of making this PDF that I'm going through, I didn't quite have this environment done, and I'm still working on developing it currently. I'll probably upload that as a separate image onto Patreon once it's all finished up for school. Here's some work on the graveyard environment. Again, this doesn't have a whole lot of detail, and it will be uploaded to Patreon once it's done for school. Here is some prop work. So in the original versions of the storyboards and the animatic, the props, the piece that Ace was collecting at the end of every single level, was a key originally, like just a literal key. And it seemed too obvious. I'd also considered making it an hourglass, but that wouldn't separate nicely into like 4 pieces in a way that made sense. You can see I kind of forced it, but it still doesn't make any sense. Excuse me. So we actually opted to settle on a cool ass rune that I designed. Thank you to like Zelda and Dishonored for the cool heckin' like bone charms and medallions and whatnot that you collect. If you didn't quite pick up on it on all the levels, because I didn't make it super obvious in the animatic, this is more just an internal structure for like if I were going to actually make it. Each of the levels are based on the stages of grief. There's the fiery anger one, which is a combat romp. There is bargaining, where you literally make a deal. That level specifically is inspired by the Suffering games from the Adventure Zone. So, shout out to the Mackle boys, if you know what's up. There's the Denial stage, which has like 2 sorts of things going, where you are following what is a fake apparition of Sinmani, Ace's wife, but it's also sort of icy themed in the fact of like, oh, you're in denial, things are moving slow, your thoughts are sort of frozen in place. The last stage, Depression, is actually sort of inspired by the Forgotten Sepulchre from Dead Cells, but a little bit more chill, also sort of based off of the Abyss in Hollow Knight, where you're supposed to be exploring and lighting the lamps to find your way through a maze. I haven't fleshed out all the details of it, but it probably would have some enemies in it with like unique glowy parts. I sort of came up with an icon for each of those, placed them on this medallion, and then I just kind of went for it. Then I had like the first shape down, and I was like, okay, but this needs to be a key, so I need to make it uniquely fit into a lock. which is where I ended up adding the cool gear shapes on the end. And then I just went in and perspective warped it, and then after I drew it in perspective, I literally just grabbed the pieces, slid them apart, and then drew the internal bits. And of course it has the hourglass in the center. And you'll also notice that each of the crests are slightly more stylized on this. I made them sort of like flow into each other better. Next up, we have some work on Ace's shotgun. So I wanted to make it more unique, but also like not too terribly cartoony, but it's still also magic. So I slapped some more runes on it, and I also decided to reuse the motif that I came up with for the pin on the, I don't remember what it's called, the brace. I didn't end up getting any critique on it, so I guess that's just gonna be the design when I get to finish it up. I also considered, I started working on the HUD and thinking about that because I'd like to have that in the finished footage as well. I thought about having the rune pieces on there, but that's not necessarily info the player needs on tap, so I cut that out. I also thought about the hourglasses being health, like your time left, but it just seemed too obtuse. Like there were too many hourglasses. I also considered a thermos as Ace's health, because I wanted to have like coffee be the HP pickups, but it also seems weird and I'd have to make sure I design it in a way that makes sense. The two things I know are the way I want it to be. I definitely want to have a portrait of Ace that emotes when he takes damage, because I just, you know, there's at least one thing that the Kingdom Hearts UI did right. I also wanted to have a ammo bar for Ace's shotgun, and I specifically made sure to segment it out because it's a double-barreled shotgun. So obviously you have the option of pulling both triggers and effectively doing a heavy attack. So I segmented it out by 2, so that when you do a heavy attack and use up 2, you can easily tell how many heavy attacks you have left and how many light attacks you have left, to think of it in those terms, just to be a little bit more useful for the player. And I also thought about it and I was like, well, hearts do the job. So I figured I would just go with hearts for now until I come up with something better, because I don't want to have an obnoxiously weird health bar like some video games do. You know, this isn't the time to have like a Resident Evil EKG. Next up, we have some color keys, which I will be going in and revising. Again, I'll post the updated ones on Patreon. These are just some mock-ups of what it might look like in color. So that is everything that I have for GODSLAYER at the moment. Man, this has been a meaty time going over this. But I want to very quickly do a bit of like channel news. Over the summer, I would like to stream on Twitch more. I just kind of gave up and stopped once school got like crazy, which I apologize for not saying something, but also it's that time of the year. Anybody who talks to me probably knows I've been drowning in schoolwork. Definitely going to be streaming more. I will try to figure out a schedule, so that'll be the goal. You will probably also see me 3D modeling over the summer, because we've been encouraged to basically get our characters modeled and rigged before classes start up in the fall. So you'll see me fuddling around learning that, and if I have some extra time, I might actually model my own VTuber instead of relying off of VRoid. So that's basically most of this summer. I guess the other note that I want to make up front now, I'm not making any actual changes, but I am considering that if doing Patreon work gets overwhelming, I might rearrange some rewards, like move some of the $1 tier rewards up to the $3 or $5, just so that they're easier for me to deliver, so that there's less that I have to do. But you'll still get like behind the scenes and whips and be able to call in during stream over Discord if you wanted. Alrighty then, so hello everybody, and thank you for staying to the end of that very long video. Yeah, I am super excited to have gotten to talk about GODSLAYER. There is so much more I could say about it. Anyway, if you had a good time, remember to like the video. It pleases the YouTube algorithm, and it makes sure that my videos don't get buried under a pile of garbage and then recommended 10 years later at 3 a.m. It's super helpful. It's free to do. Yeah, just thank you so much for hanging out. I can't wait to show off more of this project to people. And thank you for coming along the way and, you know, already being here if you're on Patreon or already subscribed or already just like my art. It's crazy that I'm gonna get to work on this project because it means a whole heck of a lot to me. But I'm going to stop rambling already and let you move on with your day. Have a great day. Wash your hands, wear a mask, get vaccinated if you can, and yeah. Bye-bye until next time.